What's up, Gould Miners? Today, we welcome to the program Sarah Sullivan, the CEO of Sugo Capital and the founder of the ConfidentInvestorSummit.com. Over the last 5 years, Sarah has managed to grow Sugo Capital from a fledgling fund to now having over $800 million worth of assets in their portfolio. Sarah started off as a passive investor in some syndications and funds and eventually transitioned into a more active role. And so she shares a very unique perspective, being able to relate to both passive investors and active investors alike. And in this episode, we get into the weeds of it all. To begin the episode, we talk about the Confident Investor Summit and how she's been able to grow that community to over 24,000 investors in just 5 short years. Later on in the episode, Sarah really gets to showcase her expertise by sharing some incredibly high-level tax benefits and tax strategies when it comes to real estate syndications, funds, as well as alternative investing strategies that we also discuss in this episode. And finally, we conclude the episode by Sarah sharing a step-by-step guide as a passive investor in real estate syndications or as an active investor in real estate syndications. Sarah really gets to showcase her breadth of knowledge when it comes to real estate funds and syndications on this episode. I mean, come on, she's been able to grow a portfolio from zero to over $800 million in just 5 short years. So really, whether you're just starting out or you are well along your journey, there really is something in this episode for everyone. I've learned a ton of things from her in this episode. Tax strategies, alternative investing strategies. I mean, come on, this woman is an encyclopedia of knowledge. So without further ado, let's welcome to the program, Sarah Sullivan.
The Gould Mine Podcast.
Sarah, welcome to the Gould Mine.
Danny, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Well, listen, we actually have a fairly similar background here. We're both Silicon Valley natives, if you will, right? And eventually you found your way into this new world, which, I don't know that a lot of, Silicon Valley techies, right, really like think about real estate investing. And so I'm wondering, like, what kind of got you started down that path? Like, how did that all come about? Because I know mine is kind of a weird story, but I'm sure you've got an equally weird story.
I don't know if it's so weird. It was very unintentional, but also kind of straightforward. So my father-in-law gave me the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And
yep.
I read it and I was like, what?
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'd been working in Silicon Valley, my husband and we'd been working for tech startups that never quite made it. And so there was always the promise of some sort of explosion in the back, right? At some exit, and then there never was. And so I was like, there's got to be something different. And so I was asking my father-in-law, who lived in Palo Alto, I said, I don't know what it's for me, but I don't think what I'm doing is for me. And he gave me that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to learn more about this. And then I went to every coaching program that Robert Kiyosaki had at the time at Rich Dad University. So I learned about multifamily syndication, commercial real estate, how to pick a retail park, storage units, mobile home parks, fix and flip, wholesaling. I learned about it all. And then I grew my family. I had some babies. And so I was like, it's not the right time for me to start doing this hands off. But then once I went back to work, I was like, here I am again. I'm back in the working 12 hours for someone else, basically living paycheck to paycheck because we live somewhere so expensive and childcare, blah, blah, blah. So I said, what else is out there? And I started investing passively in multifamily syndications because I was too busy to do it actively. And then I started really getting into the due diligence and learning more about it. And I took some more coaching programs and I realized, like, this is really fun. This is really exciting. And I'd rather spend my time here. So my first goal was just to replace my income with a couple multifamily properties. And then and now we have 36. So the first goal was far exceeded and replaced. And once you get the momentum going and you find your niche and you find your path. And so it was kind of straightforward. It wasn't intentional, but it just grew. And I went into whatever felt right and appropriate for my mind, my brain, and my talents. And this is where I am now.
It's interesting that you were initially a passive investor. And I feel like, I hear both stories pretty frequently. It's not like one size fits all solution. So what was it about how was it transitioning from like passive to more active investor? Was that a natural transition? What was it that kind of like got you moving in that direction versus just saying like, hey, I'm going to collect my, comfy Silicon Valley salary and just dump all of the excess money into these passive investment vehicles?
It was because of the natural enthusiasm I had for it. And so I was very evangelical about telling friends and family about it. And so they said, I want to learn more. Like, what? I've never heard of that. And some people said, oh, that seems like a scam, a Ponzi scheme, too good to be true. And I was like, it's not. They're good. They're not like so great that they are dismissible, right? Like 20% annualized is what we often see across different asset class syndications in the market, right? But people have never heard of it. We're like, that seems unbelievable. And so the more I was educating my friends and family about it, and then I built an online platform to continue the education. And so, so it just kind of happened naturally, but there was a decision point where I said, okay, well, I got to grow this into either a full blown business or stop putting so much time into it. And so that was during COVID. And during COVID, my online education really blew up because people were sitting at home. They'd get on Zoom and they'd watch me for hours. And so that grew the online community. So there was enough to go out and acquire assets with my investor community, alongside me because they had consumed so much of my educational material. So it was kind of organic, but it was during COVID when I decided, okay, this is, it's grown into something that is taking enough of my time that I need to decide, am I going to make a business out of it? And had I known, this may not be what everyone wants to hear, but had I known at that point in time how much work it was going to be to transition into being GP on not only multifamily syndications, but across different asset classes. We're now an investment firm that has oil and gas. We have hedge funds and different things. I might not have started out, but I'm so glad I did. So I'm so glad someone didn't tell me how much work it was going to be because it is worth it. And, anyone listening, I know one of your questions was if someone's thinking of getting into it, I say just realize that the beginning is the hardest. And once you get the momentum, then you can keep gliding. The beginning is definitely the hardest, but it's totally worth it for, the location freedom. We live wherever we want. We travel when we want. We take our family all over the world, several international trips per year. It's really a different lifestyle than the 9 to 5. And I was craving it my whole life. So the work is worth it.
I've got a lot of questions, but we're going to start with the online platform, education platform. It's interesting, right? Because I think that just in looking at the different, syndicators and the fund managers out there and everything, it seems to me like the ones that really do the best are the ones who lead with education.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, what that looks like right now and how did you start it, right? So what was the evolution of that? Let's start there.
Yes. So I was looking at different ways, I kind of picked at different things. So the way that I picked at different ways to invest in real estate and until I found what worked for me, I also picked at different ways to serve the investor community. So Facebook groups, Kajabi portals, I looked at all that and it just never really worked for me. But what ended up working really well for me, they're online summits. So we have the confidentinvestorsummit.com, and that's our educational platform. And we do at least once per month, if not 2 to 3 times per month, we have educational on Zoom, and we don't have anyone pay. It's all free. It's all open. And so people come to the confidentinvestorsummit.com and they sign up for our stuff. And then once they're in our community, they get all of our education. We send out 2 to 3 educational emails per week. And the thing is, you've probably experienced this if you've tried investing in something new. If you don't understand it, you don't move forward.
Right.
So I had someone ask me to invest in something and I was like, I couldn't even like regurgitate it to my husband what it was because it was so confusing to me. And then they kept following up. Are you going to invest? Are you going to invest? And I said, I don't even understand it. But look at the returns. Aren't they good? And he was like, yeah, they look great, but I don't understand it. Yeah. It was very obscure. And so if someone doesn't understand something, they're not going to invest with you. And if you provide education, they understand it and they're consuming the education while they're not trying to invest with you, they're going to either self-select, I'm moving forward with Sugo Capital or I'm not. And then by the time you make an offer, they already know if they want to join you for an investment opportunity or not. And so it takes the sales cycle out of it. You know, a lot of people ask me, hey, when you're making an offer, do you have a sales team? Nope. We don't have a sales team. We just, everything is automated. People, you know, they get the education, they make a decision. Is this right for you? And if it's not, if they're like, no, I don't like multifamily, I want hotels. Then I go, all right, Danny, we got some hotel investors.
Yes.
You know, we don't have what you want. No problem. Let's find someone who has something you like. And then when we have everything really smooth and automated as well, so that investors can go on the journey by themselves and we don't have high pressure sales or anything like that. And so, yeah, I definitely agree that education first and education forward companies have a much stronger own. And then also you don't have to, you know, get into the murky space of having a sales team for your investment opportunities, which, you know, nobody enjoys that on the receiving end. Yeah,
it's interesting, right? Like, and there's so many different schools of thought on that. And I want to get back to that, but I'm curious in terms of, you know, starting out with the Confidence Investor Summit, what was the reach like? Like, how are you marketing this? How are you getting it out there to people? Like, were you running ads? Were you doing cold email? Were you just blasting it to your sphere? Like, what were you doing?
Yes. In the beginning, we were just blasting it to our sphere and we were asking people that we knew to also invite folks. So, you know, if I knew at the time, I'd be like, Danny, I'm doing this educational event. Would it serve your community? Here's the topic. If you think it serves your community, here's an invite link and you can invite people. So it was all organic in the beginning. I think the first event had like 14 views. So, you know, don't worry if this first sounds small. Now sometimes we have 700 people, 2,000 people.
Oh, really?
But, now it's 5 years later. So we're rocking and rolling. We have our systems in place and everything. But in the beginning, so we've never done Facebook ads. I know that some people are super successful with that, and that's probably in our future. I just haven't taken the time to dive in and learn enough because I don't want to just do them and burn money, right? So, but I think it works for some people, just I haven't done it.
So what I'm hearing then is you've grown it from just a handful of viewers on a consistent basis to now 500 to 2,000, you said?
Per event. So
per event?
Yeah. So our community has 24,000 investors in it. The Confidence Investor Summit community has 24, I think it's about 24,000 investors in the community. And so each event, it has between 500 and 2,000 people, depending on the topic. You know, if we're talking about IRAs and 401ks, boom, we blow up that event. If we're talking about taxes, boom, we blow up those events. Due diligence, how to avoid scams, don't be part of a Ponzi scheme, boom, those events blow up.
Perfect.
And so, it depends on the topic. But it's really fun. And we do a lot of surveys just asking folks, what do you want to learn about? What topic is scaring you right now? What topic's interesting you right now? And then we give it to them. If it's not my area of expertise, I bring in another expert and they talk about it, an asset protection attorney, a CPA, whatever it is. Danny to talk about hotels, so that's not my area of expertise. Sort of thing.
Love it. I'd be happy to do one with you. So, wow. 24,000 people in your community. That's incredible. And so just out of curiosity, are you running so obviously you're running your deals. You're probably like sending out emails to the people who raise their hands, say that I want to learn about your investment opportunities. But outside of the ones that you're directly sponsoring, are you running any sort of like fund to funds as well with this group now that you've grown it to this size, or?
Not at this time, but we're thinking about it for the future because now we have the capacity to do a lot more, and we don't have, we used to, back in the heyday, we could do 9 or 10 multifamily syndications a year. This year we're doing 3. And so we have more capacity to raise money. We have more interest. So that's why we started branching off into oil and gas. That's why we branched off into hedge funds. And then, yes, there are some that we are doing due diligence right now on in order to move fund to funds in the future based on what our investor community wants. So it is a consideration.
Yeah, it just seems to make a lot of sense because with that many people, like that's, for anyone who's listening right now at home, like Sarah's just kind of like making it seem like no big deal. Like 24,000 is a lot of people. That's a lot of people. It's a lot of investors. So that's very impressive.
And it's important also to make sure that you have systems. So when I was working in Silicon Valley, I worked at the PlayStation in the customer success team. And so we did a lot of work around like, you don't want people to call you. You just don't want people you want people to be able to self-serve, and you want people to have zero problems.
Yeah.
And so that's always the goal. You don't want people to call or email you because it means they can't do it themselves or they have problems. And so I've kept that with me as I built my own company to say, okay, how can we allow people to self-serve, self-select, self-educate, self-sign up, self-invest? And so we've worked really hard to make sure that our systems support that, because as you grow your community, if you also have to grow staff because everything's manual, then you wipe out the profits that you're going to earn. And so that's also one of our core philosophies is like, we want to maintain our profit level while we grow. So grow through automation systems and processes and not through staff. And that also reserves more profit for our investors.
It's interesting, because it sounds like your avatar, right, is probably like an, accredited investor, right? Like anyone who's accredited, which is interesting because I'm running a similar thing, but we've like niched it down even more to like physicians and doctors because my business partner is a doctor. But it's interesting that you had this kind of success with like, it's like a broader niche, but it like, that's incredible. That's incredible.
And I know a lot of people niche down into like, we work with attorneys or we serve, engineers or doctors, dentists. And at one point we tried that and it was fairly narrow. And so instead of by occupation or career, we niched it more down into age groups. So we found that people who were around 55, they were spending more time learning about investments. And people who were younger, like thinking about retirement, investing was so far in the future, they wouldn't sit down and learn enough. They just like left it in their 401k, their company's running it, whatever. But folks who, once they get around 55, they're like, oh, I need to be pretty serious about what I'm doing with my money because the end of working is in their, it's in their view.
Yeah.
And so, just not on purpose, we just realized it was happening that 55 to 65-year-olds were the majority of people coming to our event. And so then we said, okay, if that's naturally who our events are attracting, let's serve that avatar, folks who are about to retire or, thinking about retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. And it works so well with syndications too, because that's 1 to 2 cycles of investment. So if our investments are 5 years and I get on the phone with someone and they say, hey, I'm going to, retire in 5 years, it's like, great. You have time to invest and get through 1 cycle. You double your money in 5 years, then now you can switch over to something that's a cash flow investment, because if you don't have your W-2 income anymore, you've sold your business. So it works really well with syndications and funds that have a 4 to 5 year time frame.
Right.
Because you can invest for wealth building now, and then once you quit working, switch over to cash flow investments. So it just naturally worked out well.
Yeah, and I actually want to dive into that now. So I'm done picking your brain on the Confidence Investor Summit because it's just very interesting to me. I'm like, all right, I think I can learn something here from Sarah for sure. So that's awesome. So all right, let's switch over to the passive versus active, because I think at some point, right, you kind of made that decision, but I am sure that there are plenty of people who you might recommend not diving into a more active role. So what would your recommendation be for anyone who's kind of sitting there and being like, hey, should I take on a more passive role, take on a more active role? What would your advice be to someone who's in that, who's kind of in that questioning phase?
Yeah, it's a really important question. And so to be clear, I have both, right? I have, Sugo Capital and I have active investments, but then I have I place my money in passive investments. Probably at least 50% of my net worth is in passive investments. So a lot of people mix it up. And so normally when people ask me that question, I say, well, where do you live? If you're looking to be an active real estate investor, it's important where you live, because if you say, I live in Marin County, which is where I live. I live in Marin County and I want to invest for cash flow. You say, well, sorry, you can't do it. You can't be an active investor. You can't, you can't really find a fourplex, but you might be able to find a duplex, but it's not going to cash flow. They're all cash flow negative. And so depending on where you live and what your goals are, it may or may not even be feasible. So that's usually the first question I ask. And if you say, I live in, say they live in north of Dallas, northeast of Dallas. Wow, you can get some single family homes to cash flow over there. So it's like, well, if you can find some great stuff and you like the hustle and you can find cash flow and that's your priority and it's better cash flow than you can get in any passive investment you find, then that might be right for you. So the first thing to consider is, where do you live and what are your goals, and can you reach your goals where you live? And so I started investing for cash flow in Indianapolis,
nice.
But it was very far away from where I live. So when things didn't go right, it was nearly impossible for me to get out there and see what was going on. I had to replace property management companies and stuff like that. It was just really, really difficult. And so that's why I don't really suggest it unless you're planning to have a huge portfolio out of town. You're not going to get the attention and respect that you need from a property management company if you just have a couple single family home rentals. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is really pay attention to the amount of time you want to spend working. So some people, they're 35, 40 years old and they want to go into active investing and they're willing to be working. And it is work to be an active investor, and they're fine with that because they're replacing their job with, being an investment manager.
Yeah.
Now, someone who's 65, 70 years old and they're done working and they're looking to invest to relax, I will suggest you get into active investing because it is work. And unless you've already been in it for years, normally actually what we find is folks around 65 years old are transitioning out of active investing into passive investing. So they're selling, if they've been managing commercial real estate, they're selling that and they're 1031 exchanging that into our passive investment. So, they might sell something, they have a $3 million gain, and they 1031 exchange that into a multifamily building with us. And so they can be passive and manage it, but they still get to, defer those capital gains. So we see more of that than the other way around. So, where do you live? What are your goals? And then how much do you actually want to work? Is it feasible given where you are in life and your goals?
So let's actually talk about that exchange. How do you go about structuring those? Because I might be wrong, and I might completely screw the pooch here on this one. But if you're investing as an LP into a deal, right? Can you exchange from let's say they have like a commercial property or a single family, right? And they're selling it, and they're going to take capital gains. They can take the gain and then invest it as an LP, or is it more of like a JV situation where
it would be a tenancy in common, a TIC structure? And so the way that I'm trying to page behind me. I would draw it out. But basically,
Sarah's about to drop some knowledge right now. She's about to drop the dime. Here we go. I'm taking notes right now, by the way. Okay.
A syndication is, it's an LLC, right? And so the syndication has the investors inside of it and it acquires the entire building. What you can also do is say, okay, instead, this building is 90% owned by the syndication and 10% owned by Danny's $3 million 1031 exchange from his hotel that he sold, and he wants to roll his money and avoid taxes. So he comes in as a TIC member. And then what we do is put an overarching asset management agreement around the whole thing that actually puts that tenant in common. So in this example, Danny and his $3 million, we say, but you need to sign this agreement that says we are the asset managers and you are completely decisionless. So you have direct ownership in order to satisfy the IRS 1031 exchange rules, but then you are in a passive position. You're not allowed to make any decisions. And so that also, so it equals a passive investment for Danny, and it keeps the other investors who are in our syndication safe from Danny saying like, hey, I'm going to make some decisions over here that aren't in alignment with, us being the managers for the syndication. So that's a tenant in common structure. And we've done it with about half of our portfolio. And so it's quite doable. You just need to make sure you structure it correctly. And the two most important things when I say correctly is you want it to work according to the IRS for the 1031 exchange investor. And then second, you want to make sure that you're protecting your other 50 investors that might be in the syndication with that overarching asset management agreement that says actually, Sarah has ultimate authority over everything. And Danny, thanks for putting your money in, but you have no decision power.
Well, Sarah, it's true. You learn something new every day, and I just learned something new. That is quite the trick. That's like wow, that's very interesting.
And then when we sell it, sorry to interrupt, but then when we sell it, you can 1031 exchange out of it as well. And
as
so
a TIC member.
Yes. So as then we sell this property, and that TIC member who came in with their $3 million, Danny can go off and do another 1031 exchange after, in 5 years when we sell the property. So it can keep going after that as well.
Wow. That's super fascinating. That is super fascinating. And I'm assuming that you can actually do this with multiple exchanges at the same time. Yes. So for example, like if you've got 3 or 4 investors that all are simultaneously exchanging out of their properties, like let's just for ease, right? 10, 10, and 10. They all come in with their own 10% or so. And so you assign them the 10% of the LLC, right? They come in as tenants in common.
Correct. I think the most we had on one was 9, and the attorney fees came in at like $90,000 or something. So we're like, I don't know, that's a little extreme. So now we're like, 3's good. 3 is kind of the max.
Yeah. That is so cool. That is a really, wow. I'm going to keep that one in my back pocket, Sarah. That one's, it's a cool little party trick. So, that's how the wealthy stay wealthy.
How the wealthy stay wealthy. And then, some folks are like, hey, I'm selling my commercial property. I have $3 million, but I don't want to put it all into one thing. And so they can still kind of maybe split it up into 3 things. So take $1 million and put it into our syndication, and then use the bonus depreciation to offset their capital gains, and take $1 million and put it into one of our oil and gas funds, which can reduce their AGI by 75% of what their investment is. So they put in $1 million, they get $750,000 off their AGI. Now, actually, you can only take up to $560,000 off your AGI with this type of investment. So actually, the max I would suggest is like $800 into an oil and gas. That's the max of your tax benefit. But there are other things. So the benefit of not doing a 1031 exchange is being able to diversify into tax efficient investments. But you do leave, then you will have to pay some tax. So it's not completely tax free, but you get the diversification. So we work with our higher net worth investors to kind of come up with a plan based on their goals. Because someone might say, this is my nest egg, my $3 million. I don't want it to go all into one place. And other people may say, it's only 10% of my net worth. I'm fine with that. 1031 exchanging into one asset, that's fine.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, that's kind of that's the hard part for, especially in Silicon Valley. I'm sure that you have plenty of people who are selling their properties here. They've got quite a bit of unrealized, of gain, right? And so they're just like, where am I going to put all this money, right? And so if you have multiple solutions for them,
exactly why in 2022 is when we had our investors saying, "Can you diversify and can you have other types of investment for us, Sarah?" And I was like, "No, I'm not an expert in other things. I have other things that I know about, but I'm not an expert." And in 2022, I was like, "Okay, I have to become an expert in at least 2 other things," because we had so many requests and people were asking me anyway. And so I said, all right, I got to go find something that's similar to real estate. And then it has the 3 benefits. It has the tax benefit, it has some cash flow, and it has equity potential. And so we went out and we really looked at what else can do that for our investors, but have uncorrelated risk. So like oil and gas has those 3 benefits for investors. But if you don't take on debt, it doesn't have the same correlated risk as real estate, which the major risk in real estate right now that everyone's experiencing is debt, taxes, and insurance. Oil and gas doesn't have that. So it mirrors the benefits, but doesn't have the same risks. So we went out and did that for our investors, and then it proved to be very lucrative for us and for them.
All right. Now you got me curious because you keep mentioning this. So when you say oil and gas, are you investing directly into, like, I'm not even going to try and guess. So explain to me what you mean by that.
Yes. So getting a bunch of investors together, say 100 people, say, hey, let's get $20 million into this fund. We're going to take this $20 million. We have some leases out on some oil fields in Texas. I'm like super dumbing this down. We're going to go drill wells until we find 20 producing wells. We get the production going, cash flow back to the investors from selling the oil that's pumping out of those wells. And then after 3, 4, 5 years, we wrap those 20 producing wells up into a bundle, and we go to a larger institutional investment firm, and we say, hey, would you like to buy this? And they say, oh, it's proven, it's not risky, you already did all the hard work. And then they buy it from us, and then it exits our investors out. So it really mimics multifamily in that way. It just has a completely different asset class inside.
So it sounds like to me you're buying land essentially, right?
Leasing it. Mm-hmm. So
you're
you buy
leasing the land.
Right, you buy the rights to take oil out of it.
I see. Okay, so you're leasing the land and you're signing what? Like how long are the leases typically for these things?
I mean, oil in general, it can be it can be any number. But usually for what we do, we're targeting an exit of 4 to 5 years.
Okay. So when you're selling it off to the institutional buyer, are you re-upping the lease before you sell it to them for like a more like a longer period of time, or like what's the strategy there?
Yeah. So it depends on, I don't mean to give so many depends answers, but there's a lot of ways to do it, I guess, is the good answer. And so it depends on how we structure the exit. Mm-hmm. So it could be either way.
Makes sense. So, wow.
And I'll say for folks in Silicon Valley, this is really attractive to them because in the first year of being an investor in the fund, you're an investor partner. So you're actually a GP in the fund. So you have 100 people. They put in $200K. They're GPs just for that first year so that they can take that tax write-off against their adjusted gross income. So you can reduce your W-2 income tax with this investment. Mm-hmm. And then in year 2, everyone moves over to being an LP. And but then they've already had their tax benefit in that first year.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So
like we have someone I talked to last week. My husband worked at Google. And so one of his coworkers reached out. They make over $1 million a year. And so we're like, okay, if you put in, $500K to this investment, $500K times 75%, You were making $1 million, you get taxed on. Now you get taxed on $1 million minus 500,000 times 75%. They're like, like what? Especially for people in California who will experience, almost 50% tax rate.
Right.
Like, why isn't everyone doing this? Like, just because not everyone knows.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like a $350,000 like in free money, basically, that you're getting.
Exactly. So when my husband worked, that we invested almost 100% of his salary in oil and gas for that reason.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's like, well, and there's all these like little, by the way, like you just shared a bunch of little tax hacks and tricks and stuff. And,
I love that stuff.
In terms of tax benefits of investing in these types of alternative investment strategies, I mean, there's so many like little tricks and tips and stuff that you can take advantage of even as a passive investor.
Yes.
What other tricks do you have up your sleeve, Sarah? I'm curious.
So the others people might have heard of, but, if you're working and your spouse is not, having your spouse qualify as a real estate professional so that your passive investments into syndications and funds and whatnot can help you with lowering your W-2 taxes. Some people are like, no way is my spouse working enough in real estate to qualify. Like, okay, that is an option. Airbnbs, a lot of people who are W-2 earners will do Airbnbs because that counts as active. So you can write down your AGI with the tax benefits from Airbnbs, and you can try to get your Airbnb to feel passive. It's still active, but if you hire a manager, all that kind of stuff. But it will take a lot to get it set up. Airbnb people will tell you otherwise, but I ran some Airbnbs. There's still, the cleaner doesn't show up and the person's arriving. What happens? I'm cleaning a house. I was like, oh gosh, man. Because you can have managers and you can have staff, but if someone doesn't show up, you got to fill the holes. I decided, I don't want to do that anymore. That was when I was younger. Should have had more spunk.
That's incredible. And honestly, I as a hotel guy, there's like the hotel versus Airbnb. You know, like there's that like animosity there almost, right? Where it's like, but I do see a wave of like we're seeing people kind of come back to hotels after, there was like that Airbnb, there was like the love affair with Airbnbs, but I think people are slowly coming to realize it's like, why am I paying more for less service? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yes. And, when we travel now, we're always like, do we want an Airbnb or do we want a hotel? And it depends on how long we're going for. So if we're going to be somewhere for a week, 7 days with our family, let's do an Airbnb. If it's like 2 nights, I do not want to even mess with an Airbnb. Like, I just want to arrive. I know that I can get into my room. I can leave and I can leave a mess. I don't care what the rule,
I totally, and it depends on where you're going, who you're going with, right? There's so many different factors. And
right. Business trips, always hotel. Like there's no benefit to Airbnb when you're doing business trip. Like you definitely want a hotel. Family, 100%. I can understand Airbnb.
Yeah. Like I was just with my family in Mexico and we did a big mistake. Airbnb in Mexico. Don't do it. Like 0 out of 10 recommend. A horrible decision, but we learned. Right. We learned we suffered through like no air conditioning, even though they advertised air conditioning among, that was just the tip of the iceberg. But anyways, so we're kind of getting close to time here, Sarah. We didn't even get through half the stuff I wanted to talk about. But one thing so just one clarification here that I think people would want to know with the tenant in common tax strategy for the exchange. Okay. You cannot exchange into a fund. It has to be a single property. I haven't found a way to exchange into a fund. Okay. A lot of people ask me, we have a fund open right now and we have so many people asking if they can. And a lot of, that's basically what a DST is. And
We're not set up as a DS team, but that's basically what a DST is. And so that's the only recommendation I have if you want to go into a fund with an exchange.
Interesting. Yep. DSTs are an interesting little tax hack, though, for anyone that wants to do that. That's a Delaware statutory trust.
Yes, and I've had people say, "Well, can't you just be?" And you can. So we could change some of our vehicles into it, but it's a different set of regulatory. We just haven't taken a dive that way yet. Maybe one day.
So someone's listening to this and they say, I'm convinced. I want to be like Sarah and I want to start a real estate syndication. What advice would you give to someone that is looking to do that?
Partner with someone who has already done the part that you're not very good at. So I started with my husband. Sugo Capital is Sullivan and Gould, shortened to Sugo. I'm Sullivan, he's Gould. We're doing this together, we're going to rock syndications. We're going to buy some apartment buildings. We didn't get anywhere together. He was like, it's not for me. We gave it a go, but I'm just going to stick to my Google job. It's way easier. And I was like, I still think it's really fun, but I think this piece of the pie is really fun. And I don't think the other piece of the pie is fun. I do not like hunting for deals, as an example. And yet I do not like talking to brokers. Other people, all they want to do, they're on the hunt. They're hunters. They're looking for the deal. They love talking to brokers and hunting. So it's like, okay, so I find a partner who's a hunter. And I'm a gatherer. And so I gather my community, my investors, and then I find a hunter and we partner together. So I would say, don't try to do everything yourself, especially in the beginning. So maybe you can grow into having employees who do the part that you don't like to do. But in the beginning, there is so much to learn. And so in the beginning, I partnered with people who'd been doing it for 10, 20 years. And I said, hey, can I tag along? What do you need? And if they said what they needed was what I liked to do and what I was good at, then when we would partner, they said, what we really need is a hunter. I'd say, too bad. We're not the right partnership. But I would find someone who really had a great track record, great experience, someone I could learn from and tag along for a couple deals. Then once I developed my systems and processes and my knowledge and my confidence, then I could go out and find additional partnerships. I could do additional deals with or without those people. But don't be afraid to find partnerships. Vet them really well, of course. But you will go faster if you partner with someone who's already where you want to be. And it's not long term. You can just partner for a couple deals to get started. And then if you want to do your own thing by yourself, then do it after you've learned with a mentor.
Yeah, I think it's great advice. I mean, obviously, I don't know. I don't really know unless you're coming from maybe the brokerage world, right? Where you've done a lot of deals on the sideline, where you could convince a bunch of investors to go ahead and give you money, to do deals if you've never had any, if you don't have a track record built up. So you kind of have to borrow that experience, right? Yeah. At the beginning. Yeah. Okay. So two follow-up questions there. Number one, because this is a question that I get all the time too, which is how do you find that person? Where did you, how does one go about actually identifying and finding that mentor? So
being in the communities that teach or have the same values that you're looking for. So for instance, the first community I was in as a student in the community in a coaching program, I partnered with the coach who was teaching. And so I really liked their style, their structure, the asset class they were in. And so I asked to partner with them. And then once I was known within that community, then other top performers in that community presented themselves for additional partnerships, right? And of course, there were plenty of people who had never done a deal and they were wanting to partner and they were giving bigger splits of the deal to partner. But it was I had a CEO of a startup when I was in Silicon Valley say that to me once. He's like, I never go to the meetups for the CEOs of startups my size. I go to meetups where it's for the CEO of the size that I want to get this company to, where I want to be in the future. And that always stuck with me. And so I never partnered with people who were where I was. I always partnered with people who were where I wanted to be. And so I found them by going to events. And then eventually when I knew what the value that I could contribute to a partnership, then I could proactively go out and just like look online and find folks who were like, bam, they have an amazing track record. They have an amazing portfolio. I'm going to, then I could present myself. Hi, I'm Sarah, I'm Sugo Capital. Here's what I can do. Don't you want to partner? And I was like, yeah, great. Yeah.
Well, now, I mean, given that you have this massive influence now, and this great investor database, that is a huge asset. And wherever you want to take that, I feel like you could, right? Like if you go, you could approach a lot of people now,
yes,
who are very legitimate in the space.
Exactly.
And they would talk to you, right? So
right.
That's that's awesome. So now I want to flip the question here, which is, for people who'd like to stay more passive in a more passive capacity, what advice would you give them if they are just getting started with alternative investments, real estate syndications, funds, all that good stuff? What are the things they should be looking for and looking out for as they kind of enter this field?
Yes, really good question. So I would say first figure out what your goals are and find an asset class that's great for their goals. So I do, if you guys are interested, I have a recording. If you go to freedomin3.com, it's the number 3, freedomin3.com. I have a 3-part mini series and it talks about exactly that, how to get started in passive investing. So I talk about writing down your goals and your vision. And then we go through 15 ways to make money in real estate, some of them active, some of them passive. Because remember, I said I went to like all the coaching at Rich Dad University. So like I tried all the things. So I have all the information. So, and we go through that. And then when you find like, okay, these are the 3 things that I want to invest in, then put together a due diligence checklist for yourself and practice, not when you're about to invest, but practice doing due diligence. So say, okay, hotels, I want hotels in my portfolio. They match all my goals. So then you would take a couple of Danny's deals. You have your due diligence checklist, which I have when I give in that 3-day series, that recording. So you take your checklist and you practice on some of Danny's deals. You run through and you do your due diligence. And then you're like, you know what? Danny seems great. Then what I do is I have a private investigator. Toltec is the name of the company. And I hire a private investigator.
I love that.
And then they do, because you can do a background check, but you can only get so far as an individual, right? And so Danny and his partners, Sarah and her partners, have a private investigator dig up anything they can over the last 20 years. This guy goes back 20 years and he pulls up stuff. And some of it would be easy for you to find, some of it not. Were they arrested 15 years ago? Do they have, tax liens on their company or whatever it is?
Right.
And so, have your due diligence process and go through it every time. Every time. And so I learned that the hard way. I was like, I'm pretty good at this. I can kind of feel people out. And then I was about to invest with someone. And I was like, I had my private investigator investigate on them. And they had been arrested 3 times. And I was like, wow, okay. Once is like maybe something happened, but 3 times. And, I had all the reasons. And I was like, I am not going to give you my money.
Yeah.
But then, figure out your goals, be really clear with yourself on goals, find what passive investments, because there's a ton out there, right? Art, litigation, oil and gas, real estate, find what matches your goals, create a due diligence checklist for yourself, do it every time, practice. And so then when you see something you like, you're ready to go and you're not just kind of winging it. That would be my advice.
Did you get all that? Everyone, did you take notes?
And if not, I said that in 3 minutes, but I have a 3-part series that takes you through that. And then you have a plan and a checklist at the end. It's freedomin3.com.
We're going to link that in the show notes. Sarah, anything like, by the way, all of the Confidence Investor Summit, all those links are going to be in the show notes, but best place for any listener to interact with you, engage with you, find you on social? Where can they find you?
So I'm not on social at all. You'll be quite let down. Actually, LinkedIn. LinkedIn.
Okay.
I do post regularly to LinkedIn, so you can connect there. Otherwise, if you sign up for one of the events on one of the links that I mentioned, then you get enrolled into our community, and then all the things. But also on my website, there's we have group Q&A sessions every week. So we have a mix of brand new investors who have never done any passive investing, and then we have investors who've been passively investing for 10 years. Then they've done 5 things with Sugo Capital, all in the same meeting. It's every Tuesday. So at sugocapital.com/book a call, and you can go in, and it's just an open forum. Sometimes we have 2 people, sometimes we have 50 people, but I host those, so that's time you can get to speak with me.
Love it. All right, great. Well, Sarah, you have been a wealth of knowledge. This has been super fun. And yeah, this is great. And in traditional Gould Mine fashion, want you to leave the audience with one final gold nugget. Take it away.
Ooh, I think the biggest thing is be really, really honest with yourself about your goals, because you can see a lot of people doing a lot of cool things. It doesn't mean it's right for you. So think about what your goals are and stay true to that and write them down. And so maybe it's, I need to replace my income of $300,000 within the next 5 years. Write down your number goal and a date and be really clear that that is your goal. Tell it to whoever you make your investment or financial decisions with, and really stick to it. And if, what we're talking about isn't a match, go find what is a match. And then if it is a match, then dive in and let's talk.
Love it. Sarah, thank you so much. Hopefully this isn't the last time we have you on the show.
Oh, I'm happy to come back. It was really fun. Thanks for having me. Audience, it was great fun. So I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Love it.